development team here at IIRSM. The webinar today will be delivered by Paul O'Shea and Jason Rymer. Before I hand over, there are just a couple of things to run through first. So to begin with, you'll be on mute for the duration of the webinar, but you'll be able to ask any questions you have using the Q&A chat function on the bottom right corner of the screen. Type your questions as these come to mind and we'll pick them up at the end. And secondly, the webinar is being recorded and the recording will be placed on the IIRSM YouTube channel after the event. Okay, that's enough from me. Paul, over to you.
Hi everyone, I'd like just to introduce myself. I'm Paul O'Shea and the current chairperson of the Irish branch of the IIRSM. We are running a number of webinars over the year to discuss various topics in relation to risk management. We have worked quite closely with John Paul Construction on a number of projects, and we're very impressed with their approach to the whole risk mitigation and the use of BIM in the tendering and pre-tendering proposals that they put to us when we were working on the projects as the PSDP. So I would like to introduce Jason Rymer, who's the BIM manager for John Paul Construction. And Jason is going to go through a presentation on the risk mitigation in construction and preparation for a construction project. Okay, without further ado, I'll pass you over to Jason.
All right, thanks, Paul. Thanks for the introduction. Hi, everyone. My name's Jason Rymer, and I work for John Paul Construction. I've been in the construction industry for over 20 years now, and the past 5 years of that has been focused on BIM and BIM delivery for construction. Okay, the agenda today, just to go through what I'm going to be talking about, is why BIM, what is BIM, BIM for pre-construction, 4D BIM and site logistics, using BIM to mitigate risk on site, digital tools and field apps. I'm going to try and focus the talk and presentation on the visual aspect of BIM, where we use it heavily for risk mitigation, especially in pre-construction. Why visual content is king. So this slide really sets the tone for why I think BIM and the 3D modeling is so powerful when used in construction and pre-construction planning. 90% of all the information we transmit to our brain is visual information. People want to absorb visual information. They absorb it a lot quicker and they retain more of the information that is sent through. So that visual content, when we provide a 3D model and we show a sequence of how we're going to do it, a 30-second sequence or a 1-minute sequence can explain maybe what a 100-page document might do in the same time frame, and has a greater impact. And this is one of the other key elements. When people follow direction from a visual and a text-based instruction, they do 323% better than the people with text only. That's a powerful statistic and figure, and I think that's one of the driving forces that has led to BIM being used extensively in construction and to mitigate risk for better planning and better sequencing of construction works. So we use it a lot for our health and safety documentation, warning signs and things around the sites in our method statements, pre-construction planning, and the 3D content and visual content just is such a much more powerful message that is received and retained much better. BIM, Building Information Modeling. What is it? Essentially, it's a 3D graphical representation of a building, and also includes information on objects and elements within the building and the infrastructure. And it's a digital version of the real thing. So what essentially we're doing is we're building it virtually in a 3D environment before we hit the ground. And that's where we get our value. That's where we can tease out any of the logistic issues or coordination or spatial issues we may have. So what is BIM? So the key component, like I've said, is it's visual. It's a 3D model. So as you can see there, within a matter of seconds, you can see what this building's going to be. You can see much of the elements that make up the building. If you had this on even 2D plans or drawings, documentation, specifications, you would have hundreds and hundreds of drawings to represent the same thing. So this is the fundamental basis of BIM, the 3D model, the graphical representation. And it's why it all started, and that's where it is. It's come a long way since it started probably 20 years ago when they started using 3D modeling, but now it's now driven much more. The 3D model is the base of it. Now it's driven into much more data management and information. The next component we're going to be talking about is, this slide is in the wrong place. Information. Information contained in with the model is another key element of what BIM is. You've got the graphical representation, and then you've got the data and information within that. The example we see below here, we've got the model of a pump, which we can see represent what the pump's going to look like. When we click on the pump, we then see a list of information, parameters about that pump. What's the model, what's the manufacturer, the size, the color, and different elements that you may want to know about that pump. Once we click further into that, we then have a document system that, for this example, we have a cloud-based document system it's connected to, and then it shows the documentation. So here we have commissioning documentation, maybe O&M manuals, safety documentation, maintenance records. That will be a live register of documents that are related to this asset. During construction stage, we'll have drawings and specifications, and once we hand over, then this leads into facility management. We would have the maintenance records and things like that. So the information becomes a big part of the model. Process and information management is the other key aspect of BIM. As you can see, we've got people, process, and technology that makes up the fundamental aspects of BIM. And within that, there's standards, procedures, and methods. So that as a whole, is your BIM process. That's why it can be quite complicated, because you've got a lot of stakeholders, a lot of different organizations working with different procedures, different technology, all with different requirements and expectations. And so to create a collaborative process, you need all this to come together, so everyone's working together in shared procedures, shared methodologies. So that's the key part of what I think BIM has given a lot to the construction industry in the last couple of years, where people have really worked hard to create these shared environments. If we leads us into the next section, which is collaboration. So collaboration is what BIM's about. It's about a shared team coming together and collaborating to deliver a project, an asset, or a building. And the BIM processes really facilitate that, and they drive to people to work towards better collaboration, transparency, trying to build up levels of trust. So to do that, you need good processes, you need good communication, and you need good trust between the various parties that will all work together for a common goal, which is to deliver the project, to deliver safely, on time, and to budget. But the key part of that is collaboration and working together. So I think that's where my sort of love of BIM and the BIM process started, was that seeing how when you have a true collaborative process, that it really is a good project to work on. Everyone benefits from it, and it's a good environment that can deliver great results. the elements of BIM and the building life cycle. So this graphic here really shows the whole life cycle of BIM and the digital asset, where it starts from the conceptual design stage of a building, leading into build and construction, operation, then into maintenance. So it's the full life cycle. And when you have the digital asset, initially the design stage is focused heavily on spatial design, where things are, what size things and shape and where things are, which leads into construction. And then the information of the actual build, we start federating the information of what we're building, which is then heavily used in the operation and maintenance, where they're looking at these, that, like I said before, the maintenance and information of the objects and the various assets within the building. So you can see the elements. So you've got conceptual design, detailed design, analysis, where they're doing lighting or heat and environmental sustainability analysis, delivery of documentation, drawings from the models, which lead into our detailed of fabrication, construction with 4D and 5D, construction logistics, which is what we're going to be focusing heavily on today. Then we're into operation and renovation. Pre-construction. This is an area we focus heavily on with John Paul Construction. We spend a lot of time in our pre-construction and planning, and then invest a lot of time and money with our teams. Being able to do this in 3D using BIM greatly enhances that process. We get a much better understanding of the project at large, the different complexities, pinch points, and where there may be inherent risks, which could be quite difficult to see and foresee in 2D format when you're looking at drawings. Mapping things out in 3D really gives you that opportunity to tease out how things fit together, how different cycles or different trades are going to be working together. So we spend quite a bit of time figuring that out, looking at that sequence of works. So when we start on the logistics, we start looking at our overall site. We start looking at the site. What are the constraints of the site? What are the surrounding environment? There might be adjacent buildings, businesses that the site will impact, or impact us, or we'll impact them, that we need to know about. We look at the traffic management, how we're going to access the site, where our welfare and site offices are. Craneage and material handling is a very big issue, especially on many of our city centre projects, where site storage is at a minimum. So we've got to have just-in-time deliveries where we can bring material in and use it straight away. And the use of cranes and how we coordinate those cranes is very important. As you can imagine, many of our sites will have 3 and 4 cranes on, so they all need to be at different heights, they're at different radiuses, and trying to coordinate, or being able to coordinate that in 3D gives it much better value. And then we have temporary works and scaffolding, hoists, loading bays, crash decks. You can see the graphic there at the bottom there, where we've looked at a temporary work scenario where we've got an interface, we've got a Lewis, a rail, roadways and pedestrians that we all need to take care of while we're building the structure. So planning that out in 3D and sequencing it, how it's going to work, greatly enhances the value of the pre-construction. Lets us mitigate risks that we're going to have in that area. Further on the site logistics, we model all our hoarding, access, egress into the sites, like I said, and produce visuals. We're looking at the surrounding environment. And these visuals, typically, we've got to engage with local authorities, local businesses, and local communities to show them how we're going to impact their environment. In some cases, it's a requirement that we need, especially from the local authority. We need to get approval for hoarding license and the things like that. So more often than not, when we're encroaching on the road or doing road closures, we'll do 3D visuals and graphics to show how that's going to impact on the public interface. We're also heavily involved in considerate construction scheme, and we spend a lot of time engaging with local communities to ensure that we minimise our impact onto the local community, and that we communicate what we're going to be doing, how we're going to be doing it. And these visuals of being able to give a 3D visual graphical representation really enhances that process. So being able to go to a community group which may not be technically minded, being able to either show them a video or a storyboard to say this is what the construction site will look like really helps them visualize what the impact is going to be. And then when we're doing during construction, there's less animosity. They've got more forewarning of what things are going to look like, so they're better engaged, and it's a more positive process. The 4D BIM, this is where from that logistics and planning. Now 4D is that the next dimension to BIM is we add time. So you've got your 3D spatial graphical representation, and what we do is then we apply our programs and add time to it, so that as elements progress, we can see the elements build through time and the different phasing and sequencing of the construction. Because as we phase and sequence through the construction program, our logistics, our site logistics will change. We may have additional cranes might move, our entrances will change, and you really need to be able to map that through. You may have a demolition phase that you need to show demolition before you can even start any enabling works and things like that. So being able to map that through in 3D and really sequence those works where we can then see some of the interfaces between some complex trays, facade, structural steel or precast and groundworks that may all be happening at the same time. How are their deliveries or material storage or their sequence of work going to impact on each other? How do we mitigate risks where we don't have people working overhead? So we need to look at that in 3D. A lot of that we can work out and sequence using programming plan and from our previous experience, but when you map it out in 3D, really expose some areas that you may not have been aware of, or different complexities or risks that you may have not seen previously or in the 2D when you've looked in the chart. So then watching it in 3D, especially when you now engage with different parts of the team, you might have specialist contractors or your project managers that are not technically minded on the BIM front, but when you can engage in a visual way, they can then see issues that they may not have seen before. We've just got a short video here that will just show you, it's only 1 minute long, it just shows a few snippets of some of our 4D animation sequences that we use to try and visualize how we're going to build this project. We just play this video for you. So you can see here we have the overall site, just to give perspective of where the site is. Some of our site entrances, like I said, temporary works, erection of cranes is a big issue and can be quite difficult in city centre locations. Logistics of cranes and sequencing of structural steel, deliveries. Material handling, how we're going to move materials across the site, and various stages of the project through demolition, superstructure, hoarding, scaffolding, sequencing of high-risk activities. So yeah, from that video, you can see that that's only a snippet, and I've just taken a slice of a number of different animations, but it just shows you the different sequences that we work to and the different levels of detail. So in various activities. So here's another one of our projects that we've worked on, is a little distribution centre in Newbridge. It was a very large site, so this is quite different from our city centre sites, whereas it's not the lack of space. We had plenty of space for storage, but a lot of the site was taken up by heavy civils, excavation works. So that meant we had to spend a lot of time to segregate vehicles, plant movement from pedestrian and people movement. We modelled all our walkways and vehicle and pedestrian movements in the model, and these were used as the day-to-day models that the guys on the ground are looking at when they're looking at the sequence. They can also see our health and safety access egress routes in the model, so that not only they see it physically, but when they're looking at the model, so if they're planning some of their works, they can see how it impacts the others, the different access zones. And the screenshot on the right there, where we see the different cells, this shows the sequence of the build. So at this point in time, we're doing heavy bulk excavation works, we're doing lime stabilisation, we're doing groundworks and foundations, as well as services and utilities, and then we're building up the structure. In cell 1, the structure, we're also doing high-level services and things like that. So there's a sequence in there. We spent a lot of time and a lot of detail looking at this sequence, how we were going to build it, and trying to mitigate risks with people working overhead, having I think there was about 10 cranes at any one time in that section while we're trying to stand still, looking at cladding and services and stuff like that. So we spent a lot of time sequencing that and working at how we were going to do it. And we were using the model extensively in this example, so that we had and we had it phased across in a linear sort of manner, so that all the trades could be working at the same time. For this is a rapid build project. BIM to mitigate risks. So I've spoken quite a bit already about ways we use logistic planning to mitigate risks, but when we have a project right from the get-go, one of the key things we look at is our high-risk activity workshops. So we have these specialised workshops with senior management, directors are involved in this, that tease out all the high-risk activities that are going to be taking place across the life of the construction project. These activities are pulled out and looked at much more detail than our general day-to-day. We still have our day-to-day activities that we require risk assessments and method statements and detailed planning for, but we highlight, this could be a list of 20 or 30 different activities that we see as have high risk, either working at height or that there's potential for a serious accident or potential for if something goes wrong, that there could be a loss of life. So these activities we look at in a lot of detail. There's numerous meetings and workshops that happen before there's even anyone turns up on site to start the works, and directors, senior management are always involved. So on these activities, the use of BIM, 3D modeling, and sequencing out some of the detail that maybe on an overall plan you wouldn't look at, but like for instance the sequence here for this job at St John Rods and Quay, we had to lift in these 3 20-ton steel beams that were bridging this 10-metre span. So because of the weight of them, the tower cranes on site couldn't lift the beams. There was insufficient space on the surrounding streets to put a 300-ton mobile crane. So the sequence here was that once they moved the bridges into position using robotic sort of low loaders to drive the beams into position, they used high 20-ton winches, which were fixed to beams at the roof level, and they lifted them into position. The tolerances of getting the beams in were very, very tight, even trying to just get the beams to site and into site. So we modeled that to show that we could actually swing the beams in. They could fit between the various columns and walls and structures to get them into the building, and then modeled it how we were going to sequence and lift them into position. So there was a lot of planning. We also had it was planned for a weekend shutdown on the area so that we could sequence the works, and we had a 48-hour period to do the works. And actually, when works were carried out, they were able to complete the whole activity within a 10-hour window, which was testament to the planning that went into for this activity. But this is typical on all our sites, that when we have these high-risk activities and complex sequence of works, we then model them in 3D. So that it really mitigates risks that you have there on site. You can foresee the different elements, different pinch points that you may have or that you may not have seen previously. And also, when you then generate a storyboard to be included into method statements and the like, when that's communicated to the teams on the ground, they can consume and absorb that information so much quicker. So that's another benefit. So then everyone's on the same page. They can see exactly what needs to be done. The use of 3D model risk warnings. So within our model, we have various signs and signage that we actually include into our logistics model. So not only we put all our own plant machinery, the cranes and various temporary works, we also put these risk warning signs. So here and the signs also have information attached to them, like there, you can see the 3D object, but there's parameters there. So we have a risk reference, and we have a number of risk warnings that can be added to the sign. This can all be scheduled out. So we can have a schedule and a list, and then you can change and update that list as the project progresses. Your risks will change, so these risk warnings need to be changed and updated. So it really brings that visual content, especially if people, when they're using the models on our weekly or daily huddles, where they're looking, okay, we're working in this area, we're building this wall. These risk warnings are there, so they may not have seen that full risk register or aware of something on it, but when they're planning out their works, they can see this risk warning and go, okay, there's a crane here, it's going to be working overhead, or whatever that risk may be fall from height, or there may be utility services under the ground. So when they go to dig, if they're planning out their works using the 3D model, they'll see these risk warnings. It's only to give them a short heads up to say, okay, there's a risk warning. One, it's overhead lifting, crane operation, authorized people only. Then they might go, okay, we need to go back and say, ask more questions, speak to the site foreman or safety officer, say, well, where's the risk for this? And then they can drill down and get more information. And that may very well change how they're going to undergo the works on that area. So these warning signs are a really good way to put the various elements, what we're working on, our different risk registers, into the model and give it a bit of visual content for people. The other key element we use is visual information tools. So these are used extensively especially for our safety, signage, information notices, especially with the construction industry. There's such a varied, with multinational, multilingual people, and being able to show graphical images with text really enforces that and improves the power of that message, and people can consume it and understand the message that much more easier. Like that graphic I showed at the very beginning where it said visual content is king, and it really is. It really improves the impact your message has and how they receive it and how they retain their message. So you can see from this graphic where we had a safety campaign regarding the moving plant, because it is one of the number one risks on site, and understanding where the areas and zones you can move with, or how to approach, or where to stand, or where not to stand, more importantly, with regards to different types of moving plant, because they all have different blind spots. And trying to understand that, maybe if you just had a text, it would be very difficult to really conceptualize where those spots are. But having a 3D image really improves how that message. And this is one of the strongest messages that we delivered last year. It's really well received, and you can see, I think you can see from the graphic there why. It's a good graphic that's quite easy to understand. But the use of 3D modeling is really powerful here in this tool, and that also feeds into our toolbox talks, our whiteboard meetings, our site inductions, all those elements where we can show, if we've got a site induction, we can show a quick short video animation in 3D where it says, well, this is where the site office is, this is how you enter the site, this is where the toilets are, the welfare facilities, the canteen. Here are some high-risk areas that you need to be aware of, or restricted working zones. And that story really enhances the people's ability to consume the information and retain it, rather than just big long texts of information. Digital tools is being heavily used now in recent years, and I think BIM has been one of those drivers where we've looked at digital tools. There's been great innovations in technology, software, and how we use it, and there's been really good applications on how we use it on site in construction. Construction really is starting to leverage some of those tools, and I think it's an exciting era that we can use these tools, and they're really mitigating lots of the risks that we may have on day-to-day sites. For instance, the clean example is the Little Distribution Centre. Again, I mentioned that one. The site was an 85-acre site. It was huge. So even to the weekly safety audits that the safety officer would do, it'd take them nearly 3 hours by the time they've walked all the areas of the site and circled the site and come back around again. So it was really a long journey. So what we used to do is we'd have these, I think it was 2 or 3 times a week, we'd fly the drone and do a big flyover right around the site. And from that, it'd be about a 2-minute flight path around the site. The safety officers could view that and very quickly be able to hone into areas that they need to spend more attention, or maybe there was some housekeeping issues, or maybe they might see some access egress issues with plant that can be difficult to see when you're at ground level. But as soon as you get that bird's eye view, you can very easily and quickly see where there may be some egress issues, or where they need to spend their time a bit more attention, so that they can then walk out onto the site and focus their time and energies in those areas. So that was something of a byproduct that we didn't initially envisage, but it was because we were doing these flights for progress reporting. But very quickly it became a useful tool for other members of the team, that they would use that to be able to get the view of the site, and then be able to improve their workflow or of their day-to-day activities. We'd also do topography surveys on the site using the drone. So instead of having site engineers with survey instruments out in the field, because we have to constantly survey the topography and the dig and various bits and pieces, we could do that with the drone. So that gets one, it's a lot quicker, and two, that the person's not on the ground, not in the vicinity of the moving plant and vehicles. So that's a massive mitigation of risk there, where we can do that survey from a high level, from a safe area that's even within the compound, and you can carry out the whole flight and survey. So that was really a big benefit, and we're using that extensively on most of our projects now. That the topography survey, it's not as accurate as a theodolite, but it's accurate enough, and it gives us enough information of what we need to process, and it completely mitigates the risk of being down in the bulk earthworks area. Roof inspections and inspections of other high-risk areas is another key sort of benefit of drone technology. It's been used extensively for especially in maintenance of buildings where they want to do an inspection on a roof and there's no safe access up there. You can use the drone, fly up and get a very good view of the roof area. You may then very well see something that needs a closer inspection, and they may say, okay, we need to get an MEWP, or we need to now put up scaffolding to inspect this area closely. But you can get a very fast, quick and efficient inspection using the drone from first principles. Live site cameras, they've also come very popular in recent years, and all our projects now, we have these live site cameras that they may have 1, 2 or 3 or 4 cameras on the site that show a complete live feed. They're being used extensively, more so than just for a site record, which they're invaluable for. If there's any incidents or you need to find out what happened when, or there's a full historic record, you can go back to any date, any time and have a full live recording. But we're using these in our daily whiteboard meetings. We print them up, either have a live television, put it up on screen. We can see where the access egress routes, you can see from the shot above, that's our Townsend Street project, that we can see where the different access egress routes are on the ground, maybe where there's some pinch points or whether we need to have a closer look. But the whole team is looking at it. We've got the contracts managers, you've got clients looking at this. So it really gives good transparency to the site because everyone can view it, everyone knows it's there. I think it also creates there is a better safety conscious workforce there, that they're not going to take inherent risks because they know that essentially they're on camera. I think a lot of sites there has been where if it's out of sight, it's out of mind, and you get some workers that may then take inherent risk that they shouldn't, or because they think no one's watching. So having live site cameras improves this transparency and getting people acting in the right way. Also, you can then have live time-lapse footage, so you can look at the build over time. And we've also seen this emerging technology where now they're applying visual artificial intelligence software that can look at the image. We used it on our Clancy Key project where they were tracking truck and vehicle movements in and out of the site. So then we can get a report of how many trucks were moving in and out of a site. It's also been applied in other projects where they have restricted working zones where they'll have vehicles or heavy plant moving area that is a no pedestrian zone. So the software is able to pick up in the camera when there's pedestrians walking in these areas and issue out warnings. So that's another emerging. It's still in its infancy, but I see that being in the near future, possibly within the next 2 years, of becoming a key part of risk mitigation or safety management on sites, where artificial intelligence, these visual aids, they can see where people are walking into high risk areas and send out warnings to the various teams on site. So I see that this becoming more widely used. Digital tools and field apps is also another area that is being heavily used. All our site inspections, safety issues, snagging, we have all our drawings up there, are done on digital field apps. Essentially, it's getting the information to the guys on the ground. They're our site managers, our foremen, the people. Their job is to be out on the construction site, getting the work done. But so getting the information and in their hands that's readily available, having streamlined workflows for them to be able to raise issues, if there's safety issues or housekeeping issues, that they can then take a photo, raise the issue, assign it to the subcontractor and send it. They can do that within a minute and it's done. They know it's gone out. Emails automatically being sent out. Various people on the team will be tracking those issues and following them up. So that whereas before they might have taken a picture on their phone, and then a few hours later they may be back in the office, then they, if they remember, or they might forget to upload that picture, but if they do, then they upload that picture. They might then track down the email, send an email, or they might print it out. There's a quite long-winded process, and then the same again when they're trying to close it out. So these field apps greatly improve the efficiency of how we can deal with day-to-day issues in a live site environment. And I think it's a great tool for like improving safety and getting people to be able to react and deal with safety issues quickly and efficiently. It also gives us great analytics. So now we're starting to build up really good analytics of what are some reoccurring issues, which subcontractors may be reoccurring offenders. Why are we seeing a spike in working at height? Do we need to now do we need to now do some more toolbox talks around that? So I think this area is a great area and will be much more focused, where you've got digital construction tools and analytic tools looking at reporting, where we can get there's a lot of power in that information of how the site's working, how it's performing, so we can be reactive before things get too severe or you've got problems get too bad. You can react much quicker to mitigate these issues. And 3D model viewers is another powerful tool. All the tablets, most of our sites, nearly all the employees in the sites have their own tablet where they can use the field apps, view documents, but also view the models. So there's many different versions. Many of our projects we're using Deluxe, which is the model viewer you see there in the corner. So that's a really good viewer. It ties in the 2D drawings, which most people are familiar with using and navigating, with the 3D model. So you can either navigate directly in the model or you can navigate on a drawing. So you choose your floor and it shows a drawing and plan of the floor plate, and then you just point and press where you want to be standing or where you are standing, and you can see what's in the model. So if you're in early stages and you're only doing some structure, you can open up the model and see where there's going to be services that you need to be aware of, or different elements, or like these high-risk warnings that we have in the model. You can see them, that will be present in the model as well. BIM 360 has also been used on a number of our sites. Very similar, has a model viewer, also linked to all the documentation. It's linked to Revit and some of the authoring software with Autodesk. They have very good viewers. So, but all the viewers are pretty much of a muchness, but it's about getting that model into the hands of the guys on the ground. Getting it into, there's a lot of power being able to get this 3D information into the hands of the foreman, the tradesman, the guys that are not going to be in the office looking at software and things like that. But if they can easily navigate and view the model, there's a lot of power in that, and they'll get a lot of foresight and be able to improve how they deliver the projects and mitigate risks on the day-to-day. That's where I think that's where we get a lot of power, getting the model into the hands of the guys on the ground. And then also we've got VR and first-person views. So this would be more for likes when we're looking at conceptual designs, maybe in this pre-construction planning, when we're trying to sort of show our vision of how we're going to construct the project to clients and various stakeholders. We can show this in first person. We can say, okay, here's our construction site. We've got it, how we're going to have it set up. They can either look at it on a screen, or you can put a VR headsets, and that really immerses yourself into the model as in first person. So I don't know whether people have done that, but when you do that, it really you get a sense of the spatial awareness. And many times once you model it and then we do this exercise, different issues or risks become apparent that maybe weren't apparent before. So that someone might have a look at something and say, okay, why did we put that there? If we move our cabins and things over here, we'll have less of a risk of X, Y, and Z. So it's really about different people will have a different perspective, and they'll see some inherent risks that maybe the team didn't see before. So it's also a very powerful tool. So that's my discussion on BIM and the various elements that we use to mitigate risks in construction. We use it heavily, extensively in the pre-construction and planning stage, but there's also power once we're in the live construction phase that we use it on a day-to-day basis for our day-to-day planning, logistics, safety, reviews and risk mitigation, that it gets into the hands of the guys on the ground, our foremen, our project managers, our engineers, our tradesmen, that they're also engaged in the process. Many of times it's just the visual content, but that visual content is still powerful. So I think that's my message for today, is getting that visual content to the greater team really gives power to the information and helps people process the information and retain it. And I think that's the key power for BIM and how it can mitigate risks. So if people are much more informed of what they're doing, they're obviously able to plan and mitigate risks out in a much more processed manner. So we've gone through, I'll just go recap that visual information is king. You'll probably see it through that presentation, that it's come through and through again why visual content is so important, and it's that message. The 3D models, they're made up the graphical information, data, textual information, and processes around people and how we do things. And 4D BIM is the 3D models over time. So it's adding that time element. And the pre-construction planning and how heavily we use BIM to sequence out how we're going to plan to construct the building. Construct it in virtual reality first to tease out any of the different logistic and spatial issues that we may have. Can greatly improve risk mitigation for both safety and cost and time, and it invariably will produce a better quality product. And then we've gone through the various visual tools and digital aids that we can use. So hope you've all got some benefit from the discussion today, and gives you some foresight on where we utilize BIM to mitigate risks for construction.
Yeah, Jason, thank you very much for that presentation. I think it was very, very comprehensive, informative. You know, the use of BIM in mitigation of risk for us as risk managers and management companies and consulting companies is critical to the construction industry going forward. Obviously, in light of the current situation that we're in now, managing risk and designing risk is going to become a very topical element, even more so than it is at the moment in the industry. And the use of all these tools for pre-construction, the logistics plan is going to be very interesting. Looking forward to it. Again, thank you on behalf of the Irish IIRSM and all of ourselves involved in the committee. Thank you very much for delivering that. We're very appreciative, John Paul and yourself, for providing that to us. And we'll go through to a Q&A session with the attendees after this presentation.
Thank you for the presentation, Jason. We've had quite a few questions come through from the participants, so perhaps we could go to those now for you and Paul to consider. So yeah. The first one is, do you feel that the use of BIM is promoting or holding back innovation? So do designers become beholden to BIM models?
Yeah, I think I've pretty well covered it through the talk there, that it definitely does feed into and develop innovation in construction. And you've seen it probably extensive in the last couple of years, that innovation, the use of digital tools, has really sort of come into its own in construction, and it is playing a positive role. I think BIM was one of the key triggers in that process, and now there's been a lot of development in software and how actually innovation in how different construction teams are using that, because it's the way our approach to the way we use it, it can be very different to another contractor. It's not saying it's better or worse, but I definitely think there's been a real positive impact and innovation. For me, I think it's just the tip of the iceberg. It's really going to be developing a lot in the next couple of years, and the utilisation within construction. And I think we'll see a lot of benefit in safety and risk mitigation from that. With regards to the design team, they heavily part of that process. So the design teams are moving with the construction companies. I think they have some excellent models that they're feeding into the process, and it's that collaborative process. I think we've got a number of projects there where it is a very good collaborative environment. It's not like an us and them. It's we're working together. We've got a common goal, and I think that's one thing John Paul's does really well. It has a real positive collaborative environment for clients, design teams, and all stakeholders for the project.
Okay, great. And then the next one is maybe not a BIM question, but do you think the cameras and drones could be used for monitoring COVID-19 social distancing when we return to work?
Yeah, it definitely will be. I've been part of a Construction Industry Federation committee over the last couple of weeks, and that's one topic that has come up. And even on the construction sites, if where there is cameras and they know there's going to be people monitoring it, it'll get people doing the right thing, more engaged. If they know they're not under watch, they mightn't be engaged with the social distancing rule. But I think the use of drones, you've already seen it in some of the media where they've used drones to be able to remote view sites. I've already seen it on a number of jobs that we do a weekly drone flight that we send to the client because they're working remotely. It's on one of the critical projects that have been ongoing up until a number of weeks ago, but the drone flights is part of their progress because they can't come to site. So I think those tools are going to be quite extensively used, and a lot more than they already are in these times.
Okay, great. Right, next question is, how much does BIM prevent and mitigate risk? So, for example, health and safety, activities, clashes, delays, etc. in reality?
Okay, I think the important thing to note is that BIM on its own won't mitigate those risks for you. You see, what it is, it's a tool that's used as part of the risk mitigation process. So if you see it as a tool, and where people, which is what we use it for. So in that pre-construction planning, if we just had the models on their own, it may help a little bit, but we use it as part of the process. We look at it, so we'll phase through the works of what we're going to actually build. We look at that in 3D. So that process definitely does mitigate risks in reality, because you're able to see what you're going to do. But if you just had the models sitting there, you could run the project, the models are there to generate the drawings, and you can just very much build a project without utilizing the model. You're not going to get the benefits from it. You have to use it as a tool, as part of your risk mitigation process. You still have to engage in these risk mitigation workshops and meetings to discuss it, but having the visual tool and the model there greatly enhances that process.
Just on that, Holly, that same question there from Stefan. I know that some of the 4D models that Jason has presented there earlier, we're involved in those projects for quite a long time. Some of them are involved with them in pre-construction for over 3 years. And the introduction of the 4D modeling alleviated quite a lot of residual risks that couldn't be designed out during the design phase. We didn't have a solution. But when we say we didn't have a solution, we had loads of ideas between the design team and ourselves as the PSDP, but nailing down a practical solution that might work was taken from the 4D model. And although we, in theory, had an idea of how it could be delivered, putting it there in front of you in a 4D model and able to scale through each element of it, from the demolition, bulk excavation, piling, right through to installation of the structure, assisted in mitigating risks that were between design and construction risks that could not be designed out.
Okay, great. So we've got 3 more questions. The next one is, BIM is excellent for large-scale projects. However, can they really be used for the small and fast projects, particularly around the costs that are involved?
I think yes, it does depend on the organisation. We have our own in-house BIM teams, and we do have specialised small projects that we will then model the logistics. It depends on the complexity of the project, but I think if it's a fast-track project, I think you can get benefit from it if you need to plan out all the sequence of works in detail, and also the scheduling of materials. Maybe there's a just-in-time delivery for materials that you can then coordinate and know exactly what you've got to do in a detailed manner. If it's very small, maybe not so much. If you've got jobs that are only taking a week or 2 weeks, then that may be that the use of BIM is not efficient, because you might be able to plan out what you need to do without it. But I think very quickly, once you get larger scale projects, they don't actually have to be huge, but that they're going to run for a couple of months, then you get value out of it. I think it's just a matter of trying to see where you get value from the process.
Yeah, just on that again, yeah, similar to what we're saying above, that our experience with BIM on the mid-range projects, we say anything, it could be up to 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, but 3, 6, 9 month period, that particularly with the Cat B fit outs, that the intervention on the landlord side end, BIM can become very useful if there's a model exists already for the building and we're going in to do large stair ropes or large interface with the actual main structure. It can still have a very useful benefit to the designer, but again, it's horses for courses in that respect. When you've got a fast track project where it becomes value, we see that it's a smaller percentage for sure. Yeah.
Okay, great. And then the next one is, can you advise on who actually does the 3D and 4D modelling?
Okay, yeah. Majority of it we do in-house. We have a team of myself and another team of technicians that we review and model probably 90% of it ourselves. When we're kind of under pressure or that we don't have the resources, then we go externally. There's a number of resources we use. V5D is a London-based organisation. Genesis, there's quite a few. 3D BIM Bureau in Ireland also do work for us. So there's emerging. There's quite a lot of companies operating outside of India. India has become a big hub for technicians and work. So, and I think you can use it to generate the information, but it's how you then work with it. It becomes important. So I think that's probably my takeaway, is that you don't rely on third parties to do all the work, because really you're the ones with the expertise and the better know-how of the job at hand. And it's being able to use a 3D model combined with that expertise that really, I think, gives value.
Okay, and the final question before we close today is, how do you communicate the design changes to all the duty holders during the project stage?
I suppose it's a combination. We have a data management system, a common data environment, which we use in all our projects. So all the information for the project is stored up in the cloud on that everyone can access. They can either access from their desktop or on apps, so that when they're looking at drawings, they're only ever looking at the most current drawings, or if they need to compare. It's the same with the models. We'd have the models on on the cloud that people can access on their tablets. And so if there's revised models, our BIM coordinators would then ensure that the main site or project model is updated with that and is shared out to the team. So the guys on the ground, that's why I think it's very important it's the guys on the ground. If you got to get the information to them, that's where you'll get value. I think a lot of that, there's people see that maybe it's only the project managers or the CMs or the senior management that need it. I think the important bit is getting this information to the guys on the ground. And so this is where the use of tablets and those apps has become really important, that they can then access it very quickly and easily, and then have more time to focus on their day-to-day activities of managing the site on the ground.
Okay, brilliant. Paul, is there anything you'd like to add before we finish today?
Yeah, look, I just thank you firstly to Jason again for the presentation. It's very good. Thought it was very insightful. And yourself, Holly, thank you very much for providing the webinar. Also, everybody that attended. It's great to see such high numbers attending the event. It's great. And yeah, well, that's it. Thank you very much again.
Thank you to Paul and the others at the Ireland branch as well who were involved in organising this. As I mentioned at the beginning, I will be making the recording available on our YouTube channel. If not this afternoon, then definitely on Monday, and I'll let you know as soon as that is available. But for now, enjoy the rest of your days and goodbye.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone.
Cheers, thanks.